Welcome to the Spring 2019 Pre-Arrival Webinar Series for international students. Today's topic is on-campus housing and off-campus living. And we will be presenting with several presenters today. Before we start though, let's talk about what the webinar series are about. The Pre-Arrival Webinar Series is a series provided to the incoming international students. The webinar series objective is to prepare incoming international students to arrange arrival plan for traveling to and living in Iowa City, to understand orientation, expectations, and responsibilities, and transition to student life and academics at the University of Iowa. All webinars will be recorded and posted on the webpage, and the link is on the slide. If you encounter any technical difficulties during the webinar, please let us know in the chat function. And if you have any questions related to today's topic, please use the Q&A function to post your questions. We will answer them live at the end of the webinar as time permits. If you have not received your I-20 or DS 2019, you must pay eShip Global fee first so that ISSS office can mail you your documents. Once you have your document, then you can apply for a visa. This information and more is contained in the pre-arrival checklist in IHOG, and the link is on the slide. And if you have any questions or concerns whatsoever about these documents or anything else for the pre-arrival orientation, please contact the ISSS orientation team at isss-orientation@uiowa.edu. Let's go over some of the important dates for you to remember. December 7th is the earliest day to arrive to Iowa City. January 6th, 2019 is the latest day to arrive to Iowa City, and that is because the international graduate and undergraduate student orientation starts on January 7th and goes all the way through the 11th. And then on January 14th starts the spring semester 2019. Let's do some introductions. My name is Andrea Siebenmann, and I am the advisor at ISSS, and I will be the webinar moderator today, and I will let our presenters today to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Virginia Ibrahim-Olin. I am the Assistant Director for Contracts and Assignments with University Housing and Dining.
Hi, my name is Kenise Evans. I'm an Assistant Director in Residence Education for University Housing and Dining.
And I'm Amanda Elkins. I'm an attorney at Student Legal Services here on campus.
Thank you. And let's review quickly some of the goals of today's presentation. So the goals will be to provide an overview of university housing and dining, including application timeline, dining options, various facilities, activities, and more. Also, the goal is for you to learn about the advantages and disadvantages of living in privately owned housing located off campus, and also learn the best practices for obtaining off-campus housing, things to consider before signing a rental agreement, and ways to avoid potential pitfalls in the process. And then we will have some time for live question and answer. Let's move on to the on-campus housing.
Good morning. So what we'll do today is provide you with a broad overview of university housing and dining, and then specifically review the application and assignment timeline for living in the residence halls. So university housing and dining, we are a large entity on campus here. We offer 6,078 Hawkeyes the ability to live on campus. We have 158 resident assistants, 14 living learning communities, 10 residence halls, which are traditional style halls. We have 15 retail dining locations, 3 different marketplaces for you to use your meal plan, and then we also have 1 very delicious food truck. So our housing application timeline, on October 16th is when the housing application will open for you to be able to apply. On December 15th, if you are a student with a disability who may need an accommodation, that is when your requests are due. In late December, we will email you your room assignment to your at uiowa.edu email account, and the information will come from the housing@uiowa.edu email that's listed on the screen, so watch for that. On January 5th, that is when the residence halls will open for you to arrive. I know that it was mentioned that you could come to to Iowa as early as December, but we will not have a room available for you to move in until January 5th. So that's important to keep in mind. You will need to be here just in time for orientation though. On January 12th is when your contract would officially begin, and that's why there's an early arrival charge when you arrive on the 5th. And then at May 11th, that's when the residence halls close at 12 o'clock noon.
So we have many options on campus for you to live with us. Some of them are our living learning communities, and that's really just a blend of your residential and academic experience. So it's an opportunity for you to live with people who are exploring the same type of maybe academics that you are or interests that you have. So we have some that are academic based, we have others that are identity based or interest based. In addition to not living in a living learning community, you could live in our new student housing or returning student housing where you're still getting that same experience with your peers who are kind of going through the same things that you're going through. And we do a lot of intentional focus on helping you with interpersonal relationships and connecting you to the community and making sure that you have what you need to be successful on campus. So we know that our students that live in our communities, they tend to stay in college longer, they earn higher GPAs, and they just have a greater satisfaction with their college experience.
So we have some very common room types in our residence halls. The most frequent one that students live in is a double room, and that's where they share a room with two people, and they have either a community or an individual bathroom that is down the hall. We have a standard double that's slightly smaller. We have a double with pod configuration, and really what that means is that there is an individual use bathroom down the hall in our new residence halls. We have suite style building that's in Mayflower Hall, where the students will share a kitchen and a bathroom. And then we have a triple room with two roommates instead of one. I think the important piece for you to remember is that most students will have a roommate. Single rooms or rooms with a private bathroom are very limited on campus and are not frequent options. To request an accommodation, if you're a student with a disability, you will indicate on your application that you may be inquiring about an accommodation, and then we will email you some documentation. You need to submit one portion of it, your medical provider has to submit the other portion of it, and all of that must be received by December 15th in order for us to support you with the most options available. If you have questions about our disability accommodations process, my colleague Colleen Shaw is available to help at any point.
So by living on campus, we have a lot of resources that we offer our students, and some of that comes with the staff that we hire. So we have resident assistants or RAs. So they are peer leaders who kind of manage our floors for us. So they check in, they're carefully selected and trained so that they can assist you as you adjust to the halls. So they're really there to be a resource and answer questions as they come up. There's also hall coordinators. So those are the professionals that live in the buildings that also support our students and making sure they're successful and engaged. They can answer questions, respond to maybe emergency situations and different things like that. An added bonus that we really like to make sure people know about is our embedded counselors. So they're a confidential resource for our students on campus. We currently have 2 who have offices in Catlett Hall. So really their role on campus is to provide that confidential resource for our students so that they can get their needs met. So they have been clinically trained and they work closely with our university counseling services as well. But they're great for outreach, mentoring, they do programming, helping people with self-care or coping with stress and things to prevent burnout. So they're really just there to kind of give us some in-the-moment services who are just for our students that live on campus with us. So some strategies that we have for you when you're living with a roommate. So as Virginia mentioned, most of our students have roommates. It's very rare for our students to live on their own, kind of in a single space, whether that's in our suites or our traditional styles that's more of the community feel. So we just think that it's a good idea for you to get to know your roommates. So find out how you all communicate best and your likes and dislikes. We always offer a roommate agreement to every student that lives with us, and we highly encourage that they take those seriously and get those completed. So that's when you all can lay the ground rules of what you want the room to look like, how you want things to function, how you all will work with each other to work out conflict as well. We think that it's a good idea to assume goodwill. So think that everyone is going in with the best intentions, and if you communicate, things can kind of work themselves out. And then communication is key. So it's very important that you are communicating with your roommate and making sure that you're saying what your needs are and listening to their needs as well. So if issues do come up, that's where your RA would come in to support you and mediate that conflict. And hopefully we can come to a resolution so that you can live in a very comfortable space.
So students who live in the residence halls will eat in one of our marketplaces, and we have 3 meal plan options available for you. The Gold plan, the Black plan, and the Hawkeye plan. When you apply, the Gold plan is our unlimited plan. You can come and go from the marketplace as often as you want. It includes 75 flex meals and 8 guests meals if you wanted to invite a friend. Our Black plan has 145 marketplace meals, so that works out to about 2 a day, 75 flex meals, and then again 8 guest meals. And then the Hawkeye plan is available only for those students who live in a room with a university supplied kitchen. So that would be in either Mayflower, or there's a handful of rooms in Hillcrest Hall where students can have the Hawkeye plan. We do allow students to make plans to their meal plan, or make changes to their meal plans until the spring semester. So once you get on campus, you can test out the meal plan, see which one works well for you, and you can make modifications until January 25th. So you're aware our estimated costs of living in the residence halls. This shows our annual cost, although you'll be charged just half of that because you'll live with us for 1 semester. It's $6,740 for a double room. And then if you were to have the Black meal plan, $3,344 is the cost of that. We also, for every semester, students receive 100 Hawkeye dollars, and that's used for laundry, or if you wanted to purchase some soda or drinks or chips from the vending machines, you can do that as well.
So many of our buildings have amenities within them that we just offer, like just another extra resource that's kind of nice to have right there where you're living. So many of our buildings have workout facilities where if you're not really wanting to go over to our rec center or have time, you can go just right in your building and get a quick workout in. We have lots of pool tables, table tennis. We have computer labs, study lounges. I talked a little bit about our living learning communities. Our marketplaces are connected to our halls across campus. Laundry facilities, so those Hawkeye dollars that Virginia mentioned, that's how you'll do your laundry. We have a front desk that is open to receive packages, ask questions, check out board games or other supplies that we have in the halls. So we try to have everything kind of centrally located for you so that whether we can't give it to you right in that moment, we can tell you where to go, or we can have it right there for you. So use our front desk is a really great option as well.
Our residence halls come fully furnished, but there are some things that you would need to bring if you are going to be living on campus with us. And that would be your bedding, anything you need to do your laundry, some shower items, your toiletries, academic supplies, since you'll be here to study, that's important, your utensils and your cleaning supplies. We have Wi-Fi and wired internet throughout all of our residence halls. So depending on which type of connection you would prefer, it can be helpful to bring in an Ethernet cord, but it's not essential. And we also, you know, if you're someone who would prefer to study under a desk lamp, if you're not in the library in one of our study lounges, that can be helpful for you to bring as well. And then overall, we just have some general recommendations as you're applying for housing. We want you to know that we have room for every new Hawkeye that would be interested in living on campus. We will take care of selecting your room for you, so that's something that you don't have to worry about at all. And we will be making your room assignment based on when you submit your housing application. So those people who apply earlier in October will receive a room assignment before someone who applies later in November, for example. We want you to be flexible and open to as many options as possible. And that's just because our current students are going to be moving around and they will study abroad, and that's what creates an opportunity for you to then live in their space.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
All right, so we're going to switch over to off-campus living now. And so if you are not wanting to live on campus, we have obviously some off-campus housing options as well. So there's pros and cons, so good things and bad things about living off campus. For example, there's more options for types of housing. So if you want to live by yourself, for example, there's going to be more options there. If you want to live in a house as opposed to an apartment. So if you want to have 8 roommates, that's more likely to happen off campus than it would be on campus. It's possible to save money. It kind of depends on the size of your apartment or your rental apartment, or what location you want to live in. There's also increased availability for parking. Parking on campus can be somewhat limited and somewhat expensive, but there are some apartments in Iowa City and outside cities nearby that come with parking or have it for a lower rate. And then if you're bringing your family with you, there's going to be more options off campus for more houses, for example, especially if you're bringing your children. So what are the disadvantages of living off campus? One is that there's a risk that the apartment or the house that you're renting is not very high quality and that it's not maintained very well, because there are private owners of the buildings who are not always the most responsive. There's also some uncertainty with how much your apartment is going to cost, whereas Virginia mentioned, at the very beginning how much it's going to cost to live in on-campus housing. For off-campus housing, your bills might change because you used more water or you used more power this month. That bill is going to be a little bit higher. There's also potential for transportation difficulties, especially if the farther away you live from your classes. You may have to take a bus. There may be weather issues, where if you lived on campus, you would likely be much closer and you could walk to class. And then lastly, there's always roommate problems or potential for roommate problems, regardless of whether you're living on campus or off campus. But again, off campus, there's going to be more opportunities to live by yourself if you feel more comfortable doing that. So tips for looking for an apartment or a rental house. First off, consider the hidden costs of renting. So usually the landlord will include in the listing how much the rent is, but they don't include things like how much the utilities are, how much parking is, how much a pet fee is, for example, if you want to bring perhaps a dog or a cat with you. You don't necessarily know, they don't tell you every single cost up front. For every apartment that you look at, you want to look at the lease, and a lease is a written document. It's a contract between you and the owner of the building regarding each other's responsibilities as far as paying rent, making repairs, those types of things. If possible, we want you to look at the apartment, view it before you move in, because sometimes it's not, they may not be telling you exactly what the apartment looks like. We also want to make sure that this is actually a valid and a real apartment that is available for rent. We have seen situations in the past where international students were told that an apartment was available for them, and this person pretending to be a landlord took their money, and then there wasn't actually an apartment available. So if you're not able to come to Iowa City to see the apartment, we would recommend maybe sending a friend who's already here to visit the apartment or the house and to take pictures for you. As soon as you get to campus, if you'd like to, you can schedule an appointment with my office, and you can have a lawyer read your lease for you and answer questions about the lease. Or if you have questions about the lease, you may want to ask the landlord before you sign. If possible, it's a good idea to talk to the people who currently live in the apartment that you're looking at, because they're going to be able to tell you what it's like to live in the apartment. Is it loud? Is the landlord responsive to tenants? And other things like that. And then lastly, especially if you live in Iowa City, there is going to be a rental permit that the city requires the owner of the building to have. That's available online on the Iowa City Housing Inspector's website. And that can tell you who the landlord is, how many people are allowed to live in the apartment, and if they've had any issues with maintenance in the past. So when you're signing a lease, again, that's a written document. It's a contract between you and the owner of the building. Please remember that once you sign it, that means it's legally binding. And what we mean there is that you can't just change your mind the next day. So if you're not 100% sure you want to live in a place, don't sign the agreement, and don't sign multiple agreements. Because once you sign, even if you don't move in, because you change your mind and you want to live someplace else, you are still required to pay that rent or find someone else to live there for you. We think it's a good idea to sign the lease at the same time as your roommates. And the reason for that is because when you're picking your roommates, it's important to pick someone who's going to be financially responsible. Because if you don't pay the rent money to the landlord, your roommate might have to pay for you, and vice versa. If your roommate doesn't pay their rent, the landlord can make you pay it for them. When you sign your lease, make sure you get a copy of your lease for your records, and that way you can bring it to us if you have questions about it, or if you have questions about your lease in the future, it would be good to have a copy of that paperwork with you. I know I've mentioned this quite a few times, but there are quite a few apartments in the Iowa City area that are just one bedroom, and that way you don't have to worry about bad roommates. And then it's important never to sign an incomplete or a partial lease. Sometimes these leases are many pages long, and so you don't want to sign the lease unless you have every single page. Before you move in, or as you're moving in, it's a good idea to buy renter's insurance. Renter's insurance is low-cost insurance, similar to what you would get for a car. And what that does is if you accidentally perhaps have a small fire, or if there's water damage, or something like that, that you would not have to pay out of pocket and your insurance company would pay for it. You can probably get renter's insurance for about $10 a month, and you can get it from really any car insurance company is going to have renter's insurance as well. When you move in, we want you to complete a move-in checklist. Your landlord might provide the list to you, otherwise we have one on our website. And what we want you to do is go through the apartment or the house and look for every single thing wrong with the apartment. So if there's something broken or something dirty, or if there's a stain on the carpet or there's a chipped tile on the floor, we want you to write it down, and then we want you to take a picture of it. And the reason for that is we want you to show the landlord that you didn't cause that damage, that it was already there when you moved in. And then you'll also need to set up your utilities. You'll want to read your lease because sometimes the owner of the property, the landlord, they will pay your utilities for you. And utilities would be things like the water bill, the electric or the power bill, or sometimes the landlord will pay for internet at your apartment. But if they don't, you'll have to call the companies to sign up for those utilities. There's contact information on our website, the phone numbers and the websites for those companies. So when you're moving to while you're living in your apartment, it's important to clean regularly. You're responsible for cleaning the apartment. It's important to pay your rent money on time. It's almost always going to be due on the first day of every month. Even if you're not, let's say you've gone home for winter, or you're out of town, but the first of the month comes by, your rent is still due on the first of the month. you should tell the landlord or the owner of the building right away if there are leaks. So let's say there's a sink that's leaking, or that there's any other damage to the apartment, because we want them to fix it right away before it gets worse. And then one of the most important things that I'm going to tell you today is that you should never turn the heat all the way off in the winter. And that's basically from November to March in Iowa, because you can turn it down, but don't turn it off. We have pretty cold winters here in Iowa City. I believe it was last year and the year before, especially over winter break. It got very, very cold here. And students were turning their heat off and the pipes froze. And what happened was the pipes burst. They caused a lot of water damage to the apartment. So you could turn it down, and the lease will tell you how many degrees to turn it down to. Just don't turn it off. And then when you move out, and I did want to mention this, is that leases here in Iowa City are year-round, meaning that most leases start in August, although I know you won't be here till December or January, and they go all the way through July. So even if you decide to, if you have an internship or you're going home for the summer, you're still expected to pay your rent for May, June, and July, unless you have someone else who's going to live there and pay the rent for you. That's called a sublease. So let's say you're moving out at the end of July. It's really important for you to clean, because it's your job to put the apartment back into the condition that you found it in. So you want it to look like it did when you moved in. So you're going to take pictures when you move in and pictures when you move out to show that you left it in a good condition. It's also important to leave a forwarding address, and that just means an address it could be a friend's address, it could be your new address, so the landlord knows where to send any refunded money back to you. And then lastly, this is just a short presentation today. Our website has a lot more information about finding apartments, picking roommates, getting things fixed. And I don't think I included it on here, but the other thing I wanted to mention is that if you don't mind the travel, that you can often find less expensive apartments or bigger apartments for a lower price if you go farther away from Iowa City. For example, there's a city basically attached to Iowa City called Coralville, and there's a pretty regular bus system that goes from Coralville to Iowa City. There's also some smaller cities like North Liberty and Solon. Those are harder to get to campus unless you're going to be driving, but you are going to be able to get some perhaps lower priced or better quality apartments there. All right, I think that's all we have for the presentation side of things.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. And we do have a few questions today. And one of them, the first one, is actually not related to the topic today, but let me answer that first, because it's a question about the orientation and whether student can come to the orientation late and they are already in the U.S. The orientation, to answer very shortly, the orientation is mandatory, and it really does not matter whether you are coming from abroad directly to Iowa City or whether you are already in United States. If you are starting a brand new program at the University of Iowa, the orientation for international students is mandatory for all, and then we would strongly advise that you make every effort and arrangements as appropriate to arrive to Iowa City by January 6th so that you can attend the orientation. So I just wanted to make sure that we answer that question first. And then we have a variety of questions, and some of them are related to the on-campus housing, and so let's start with that. Can someone please explain what ADA accommodations mean?
Sure. So ADA accommodations, that stands for Americans with Disabilities, although it also would qualify for international students as well. So if you are a student who may use a wheelchair or may have some medical problems that would be assisted by a certain living arrangement, then our staff will work with you one-on-one to make sure that you have access to the appropriate physical facilities to help you. We also offer support with our dining facilities that if you are a student with food allergies, you can work with our dietitian and we'll make sure that you have specially prepared meals for you if you need that.
Thank you very much. The next question is about resident assistant position, and the student is asking whether they can apply to be a resident assistant.
Yeah, we encourage and we'll have that process starting probably in November, so it will start before you arrive. But it's probably a good idea for you to live with us and kind of get acclimated to being here in Iowa City and on campus, and then the following year apply. But we welcome all of our students to go through that process and to become an RA. It's a really great experience for you to kind of give back to the community, but also continue to enhance your own skills.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next question was about the buildings, the dorms, and it was whether students need to pay extra fee to use the amenities at the dormitories.
No, students do not need to pay an extra fee to use any of the amenities in their residence hall. So if they wanted to use the lounge or the computer lab, they may have to pay for their own printing if they need to print out papers, but the computer labs are available to them 24 hours a day if they wanted to use that. The dining facilities are open from 7:30 until, almost 8:30 at night, so they can eat, at any point in the day if they're hungry. And then the laundry room is always available. Students do have to pay per load to wash their laundry, but they can use their Hawkeye dollars, which are put on their university ID card, to pay for laundry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. The next question was about the off-campus living, and basically whether living off-campus is less safe than living in the dormitory on campus.
I don't think it's less safe to live off campus, but I do think it's important if maybe consider, does this apartment building have good lighting, especially in the parking areas? Are there security cameras? Generally speaking, Iowa and Iowa City are safe places. But it's really about your comfort level. And, we always recommend that if you don't feel safe, we have resources available for rides, to get a ride someplace, or to walk with friends. But generally speaking, Iowa City, throughout Iowa City, and really the state of Iowa is a safe place to be.
Okay, thank you. There's another question, and this is more about whether there are graduate student dormitories specifically available.
We do not have a graduate student dormitory that's run by the University of Iowa. However, there is the apartments, they're called Aspire at West Campus, and that is very close to the university, and that is primarily geared towards graduate students or those with families.
Okay, great, thank you. And then another question was, Amanda, you mentioned that you were recommending that students should see their room before, or apartment or building before they arrive. And so the question is, can I preview my room before I arrive? So do you know if there are pictures available of some of the...
A lot of times the owner of the building, or what we sometimes call the landlord, has websites that do show apartments. It's not necessarily the apartment that you would be renting. Sometimes they'll say, well, we have 10 apartments that look the same, and this is one of them. I would ask the landlord specifically for pictures of the apartment that you're interested in, or ask the landlord for contact information for the person who currently lives there, because they may be willing to take pictures or maybe Skype with you or video chat so that you can see the rental unit.
Okay, thank you. What about the dorm rooms? Is there information about how the dorm rooms look like?
Yes, so we have general information on our website. We have walkthroughs that students can see pictures of what other students have done to their rooms. You may not be able to see the specific room because there are other Hawkeyes living there right now, but almost all of our residence halls, one room looks exactly like another. We have a few that the rooms are quite unique in those buildings, and that's because the buildings are a little bit older. They have been updated and renovated, but the size may not be the same from one room to the next. Okay. But overall, please look at our website. We have pictures of what comes in all the residence halls. We have a breakdown of the different buildings and where they're located and what they offer.
Okay.
The dimensions are on there of how big a room is, and then it's really good to look at what students have done so you can kind of know what to bring, what you might want to buy once you arrive.
Okay, great. On the same line, actually, we have a question about Aspire apartments. Do they have the same amenities as the dormitories do, or where can I get more information about that?
I would refer you actually to the Aspire staff. We have a link to their website off of our housing one, or you can just search Aspire at West Campus in Iowa City. They have a variety of amenities, but I am not quite familiar with all the specifics that they offer because they're run by a private company, not the University of Iowa.
Okay.
One thing I know that Aspire has that you wouldn't find in other residence halls is a dog park, and they allow pets. I believe there's certain restrictions on it, but they do have a dog park or a place to walk your dog or let your dog run, a fenced area for your dog to run around. Aspire is not directly on campus. It's a few minutes away, but there is a bus that comes very regularly.
Thank you very much. And then we have one more question. About the off-campus apartments. Are there apartments that I can buy instead of rent? What if I want to become a landlord?
That's a good question. Right. Well, let's start with the second half of that. As far as being a landlord, that may not be okay because of your visa status. Because the purpose of being a landlord is to make money, and I know that there's restrictions on F1 students making money. So we would be very strongly advised to speak with ISSS advisor about something like this so that there are no issues with their visa status. Yeah, absolutely. So, and we do get regular questions about students wanting to start businesses separate from landlord, and really you should speak to ISSS or an immigration attorney about that. As far as buying, I've seen it done. It's very, very, very rare because most of the time you're not planning to be here for a significant period of time, more than maybe a couple of years. So I personally, I've never bought a house myself, so I don't have that experience. I think you might want to get a feel for Iowa and Iowa City first before you make any more long-term commitments.
And again, like you mentioned, Amanda, I think that would be a question to ask either at ISSS or consult a private immigration attorney.
Absolutely.
So that students know what is within their limits. And because this question specifically would be something beyond our advising actually, but not the one about the landlord too. So yeah, interesting questions. Anything else that the presenters would like to share with the audience today that you would like to mention?
I'll do a quick plug. So we've been talking about landlord law today, but Student Legal Services gives advice on a lot of different issues. So once you get to campus, if you have questions about things like our alcohol laws or other laws that we have, if you have questions about divorce, if you have questions about adjusting your status for you or maybe a significant other, if you have questions really about many, if not most areas of the law, we do have attorneys on staff, and our legal advice is free to University of Iowa students.
Thank you.
And I would say that the residence halls offer a very good supportive environment if you are just arriving to Iowa City for the very first time. And even if you're going to be here for 4 years, we might be the great place for you to get that start, get yourself settled in the spring semester, and then explore all of your options, whether that be living on campus for multiple years or transitioning to an off-campus environment. We have great staff like Denise and her team, and we'll be happy to help you transition and learn your way around Iowa City.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. And before we conclude our webinar today, we're sending you a very brief survey that we'd like you to please complete and give us your feedback about the webinar experience today so that we can either improve anything that you may notice that we have not covered or any topics for future webinars. Also, we would like to remind you that this is the first in the series of webinars for spring 2019, and we will have the next webinar on October 5, which will cover getting started and making travel arrangements. We will be talking about how to use MyUI and the system of IHOC for international students. So please make sure to reserve this date for listening to us. And then we look forward to having you join us on October 5 and the rest of the webinar series.